Brian Harvick. I'm the assistant director here at the North Stratton Veteran Location Success Center. I did 22 years active duty in the United States Army before I retired. I got my bachelor's degree while on active duty using the Army Tuition Assistance Program. Found my way here to working at the Veteran Military Success Center after retired. Love my job. I get the opportunity to do things like this to try to help empower you all to be successful as you transition from camouflage campus and campus to career. So what we're talking about tonight is really how to follow up after career fairs. We're going to talk about LinkedIn as a tool to facilitate that, but the general conversation is going to be more about what do you do after a career fair? How do you follow up? How do you help make yourself stand out? So what does everybody think about the recruiter's role in a career fair? Have you ever sat and thought about what they're going through, what their experience might look like as a recruiter at a career fair?
I haven't even thought about it.
Okay, so you haven't thought about it at all, but you've seen career fairs happen here on campus, yeah?
Correct.
So if you go in your mind's eye real quick and you think about it, what do they usually look like? You describe them as lots of students or very few students?
Some of these ex-students, from what I see.
No, I'm saying like when you look at the career fair, would you describe it as a whole bunch of students or a few people?
A whole bunch.
It's chaos, right? It's madness. Now imagine you are a campus recruiter and you're standing there at your table and you have a line that is about 2 hours long of students, and you're giving each one of them about a 30-second elevator pitch to introduce themselves, drop their resume on the desk, hand them a card and thank them for stopping by your booth, because that's about all you can tolerate, right?
Right.
Some employers are like that. Some employers, you can sit there and talk to them for half an hour, and they're happy to entertain that whole conversation. It just kind of depends. But you have to safely assume that you're not the only career fair they're going to attend this week. Those folks get paid by those companies to go to college campuses and find talent. Purdue is not the only place they're looking. So they're going to go from place to place to place. So you're not competing with just all of those people in line with you today. If it's a multi-day event, it's yesterday or tomorrow's line as well. But maybe they're going to IU after they leave here, or over to Ball State, or over to Illinois, or up to Michigan, or wherever they're going to go next. So you're competing at a career fair for their attention to stand out in that crowd. So we covered a career fair prep workshop earlier in the semester, talking about how you dress, the research, how to start your conversations, questions to ask, things like that. They're going to make you memorable in that moment. But I can tell you from experience, having been a recruiter at a career fair before, it's very easy to forget you after you've walked away. And I've had 50 more conversations that are generally pretty similar. Because they usually go something like, you're a student at this school, you're getting a degree in this program, you probably belong to clubs or organizations, you probably have some kind of a part-time job or a hobby, and maybe or maybe not, you've done an internship related to the field. Next. They're going to come up and say the same 5 things, generally, right? So that's why the follow-up is so important. I like using LinkedIn as a tool to do that, because LinkedIn, have you ever heard the game 7 Degrees of Kevin Bacon? It's an old game. It's from like my generation. So back when I was growing up, Kevin Bacon, very prominent actor, was in everything, and he co-starred with everyone. And the game was, you could name an actor or actress, and within 7 people, you could connect that person to Kevin Bacon in a movie. So like, Sean Connery. Sean Connery was in James Bond with so-and-so, who was in this movie with so-and-so, who was in this movie with Kevin Bacon. And that was the game. LinkedIn is like that. You're 7 degrees away from being connected with just about everybody on the planet. And you can figure that stuff out through LinkedIn. So if you've got an effective LinkedIn profile, awesome. If you don't, we have those recordings on our YouTube channel. You can go back and check those out. I will have more dedicated LinkedIn workshops in future semesters. But having those, connecting with people, doing some networking, and using LinkedIn as a tool that it can be is super, super effective in helping you make those connections. So one of the things that'll happen is you'll probably get a business card, right? And this is a business card for a woman named Julia Buckley. She's the Chief Operations Officer for a company called Reliable Microsystems. And I met her earlier this week at a networking event. Not quite a career fair, but similar. And her organization is interested in recruiting military talent. So I, as the assistant director here, who's in charge of making these kind of partnerships and collaborations, I'm going to reach out to her on my LinkedIn and connect with her. And I'm going to thank her for our conversation. I'm going to remind her what we talked about, tell her that I'm looking forward to the next thing, right? And so our conversation went a little like this. You know, I introduced myself, talked about my position here at Purdue University. I covered kind of how many students that we support here at Purdue. Told her that we've got over 2,400 military connected students that we support through our office. Her eyes got about as big as dinner plates. I told her that I'd been to her webpage to research her company a little bit, see what her company was recruiting for, and they were looking real heavily for electrical engineers. So I told her I'd done additional research and I looked at my student lists and I found out how many students we have currently going through electrical engineering programs here at Purdue University. And we had, it was over 100 students that were currently pursuing that degree, and 60 some of them were military or are either veteran or currently serving military. And would she be interested in trying to connect with those students? And she couldn't say yes fast enough. And so we had a little bit of a talk, a little bit of conversation about how her organization helps build microchips specifically designed to help with the Department of Defense applications. They do some things to harden the microchips against radiation and some other harsh environments that they might find themselves being exposed to in the military. And so how cool would it be to have an engineer who's been trained and educated by Purdue that understands what that system might have to go through because they lived it, right? So she was very, very excited, wanted to get me connected with their folks. They're going to do talent acquisition and so on and so forth. And so that's what I'm really looking for. That's my ask, right? So again, reintroduce myself, thank them for the conversation, remind them of what we talked about, and then close out with the ask. That's a really important piece. What are you asking for? Why are you taking the time to reach out and connect? So if I go out my little script and cheat sheet, right? It's important that you do that reach out because not everybody's doing it. There are a lot of students that will walk up to a recruiting table, do their elevator pitch, have a conversation, however long it may be, leave a resume, maybe grab a business card. Maybe they've got one of those cool ones that's got the QR code that you can instantly connect to them on LinkedIn. And that might be all. And that's as much effort as they put into trying to connect with that one employer. But if that's the employer you really, really, really want to work for, do you want to stop there or do you want to keep trying to work it, right? You want to try to keep connecting, keep working on it. So understanding their perspective, understanding that they're going to see lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of folks who look, sound, act, have been the same experiences just like you. This is a way to differentiate yourself and to do it professionally. The meat and potatoes of it are for LinkedIn, for best practices, keep it concise, right? You're going to go into LinkedIn, you're going to find that recruiter. You have, again, their name or business card, and maybe their business card actually has their LinkedIn URL in it, so you can find them easily that way. But send them a message, keep it concise. They're busy, get straight to the point, right? You don't want to write them on Encyclopedia Britannica worth of a message. You just short and sweet to the point. Reference the conversation, really, really important. If you can, try to use something directly out of the conversation. You know, one of my tips at career fairs or networking events is I always had like a little notebook, pocket-sized notebook in my hand because I'm terrible at remembering things. And so I would have this conversation with these folks, and as soon as I walked away from the table, I would be jotting down notes to try to help me remember who I talked to, because names are the first thing I forget. And I would try to write down what we spoke about, anything that was interesting, anything that was in particular. So then I've got notes to reference in my thing. Hey, I really appreciated hearing about the new polio and filarone that your organization is developing that's going to be coming on the market next year. How exciting. And that's why you're recruiting for these positions, because you're expanding your reach in that market or whatever. So express the continued interest, reiterate your enthusiasm for wanting to join them. Why? One of my favorite questions is recruiter, why us? Why this company? Why do you want to come work for me? And if you can answer that question or articulate it well, huge brownie points, right? So before I got over to Purdue, I was working in sports, for a sports management organization that owns stadiums and teams and properties. And I would have to try to hire people in sport. Everybody wants to work in sports. You got the cool logo on your polo shirt, you know, Maple Leafs or whoever, right? And I would ask them, why do you want to work in sports? And the number one answer I always got was because I was an athlete in high school. Okay, that's cool. I appreciate that you have a passion for sports, but I'm not hiring you to play. I'm not hiring you to watch. I'm hiring you to create experiences for other people. So tell me something that speaks to that. That was kind of what I was looking for. So if you can tell these recruiters why you're interested in their company, that's awesome. And then you can reference back to it again in this reconnection. Hey, I'm still super excited. I'm even more passionate about, you know, underwater basket weaving with your organization because I heard you guys have the coolest snorkels, whatever that example ends up being, but you reference back to that. Highlight relevant skills or experience. Talk about the education that you're getting here at Purdue and how it prepares you to be an asset to their organization. Whatever it is that you're studying is in line with what they do. Or if you're a veteran or a currently serving military member, like maybe something you did in the military is something that helps you align well. So, you know, you were a satellite communications repair specialist, and now you're talking to Motorola about working in their satellite communications department. Well, not only do you have now Purdue education, you have relevant real world experience working with these kinds of systems and technology. Just remind them. And then the call to action, right? Suggest next steps. I'd love to know more. Hey, I just applied to X position on your webpage, because right, that's one of the things that you're going to hear from everybody. Go to our webpage and apply. Here's our QR code to our careers page. Go there and apply. Let them know you applied. Hey, I applied for this position. Looking forward to hearing back. I personally have never had any luck with the applicant tracking system by itself. As a blind applicant, whenever I've applied for a job that I've never spoken to anybody at the organization. I've never talked to anybody at the company. I just sent in a resume and an application. I've never gotten a call back. Not once. But every single job I've ever applied for where I spoke to somebody either beforehand or afterwards, I got a call back. And every place I ever got an interview, I got an offer. So there's ways to work it. So I'm not saying I've been 100% successful, because I haven't. I sent out a lot of blind applications to a lot of organizations when I retired, and I was striking out like crazy. But those organizations where I finally got a chance to talk to a real person and let them know, hey, I've applied, there's sometimes those people will be advocates for you on the other side, and they will make sure your resume and your application get pulled through the applicant tracking system. I'm not guaranteeing that, but that is a possibility that they could be helping make sure that, hey, we had an amazing conversation with this student at Purdue University's career fair, and they just sent me a note saying they applied for this position. I don't care what ATS says, you need to pull that resume and application. I'm telling you, this person is a superstar. And the HR person or the hiring manager, whoever's doing the function of it, says, okay, cool. And looks up your name, pulls your stuff out, and make sure that you get human eyeballs on it. That's really what the follow-up is all about. Don't forget me, and see if you can get them to help you out. In my case, with Julia here, I'm not asking to connect really with Julia. I want Julia to connect me with her talent acquisition folks, because those are the folks that I need to get connected to. So maybe you talk to the recruiter, but they're not the people that were in the right department, right? You talked to some company and you're more in line with nuclear engineering, but the people they sent out were electrical engineering people. Because a lot of times companies will bring not only their talent acquisition person, but somebody who works for the company, probably alone with Purdue, or in our case, when I bring to my career fair, they send veterans a lot, or their military folks, right? Yeah, you know, I think you might be a great fit for that, but I don't really know, because that's not my department. Your ask might be, can you connect me to somebody in the nuclear engineering department for your organization? I would love to continue having conversations. about your organization and opportunities. Okay,
So just to reiterate, to be honest.
Okay.
If you apply online on their website
Mhm.
without having talked to them. And then you obviously want to like connect with them in some other way. What precisely do you do?
Great question. So that's not the targeted, the follow-up that I'm kind of talking about, but to answer your question, I like LinkedIn as a tool because I can peel back the curtain and see the organization, right? I can go to that organization's LinkedIn page and I can see the people who work there. And I can add a filter, Purdue alumni. Or I can add a filter, military veterans. And I can find people who have intangible connections to me that might be more likely to help me out, right? So you wanted to do Aero and Astro, right? So you're looking into Lockheed Martin, just as an example. Hey, I'd love to go work for Lockheed Martin. Lockheed Martin has Purdue alumni employed there. And so you could theoretically search for these people on LinkedIn, find somebody who's working as an Aero Astro engineer, Purdue alum at Lockheed, and send them just a blind message. Hey, I'm a current Purdue student studying Aero Astro, really interested in Lockheed Martin. I was wondering if I could have a few minutes of your time to maybe do an informational interview, pick your brain about Lockheed, about what it's like to work there, what things I can do as a current student to position myself well to be a strong candidate. You know, what things did you do to get them to notice you and hire you? You know, those are great things. And I find very often those folks that have those intangible connections, like, hey, we both went to Purdue, or we were both in the Army, or we both in the military, or, you know, I grew up in the 1900s. That those folks genuinely want to try to help the next folks come along. Now they're busy, right? They are busy, so you gotta be a little bit patient with them. You gotta be able to work with them on their timeline. You can't be like, nope, I have 30 minutes between my classes on Thursdays, between 12:30 and 1, and that's the only time I'm willing to talk to you. Tough. You gotta be a little bit flexible with them, right? Because you're asking for a favor. And in that conversation, maybe it's, could you connect me to your talent acquisition folks? Or do you know somebody that does recruiting for that aspect of your organization? Or like, I always try to ask people, like when I'm talking to people in informational interviews, and this is kind of off the topic of follow-ups, but informational interviews, I ask them, you know, what are you reading? What's something that you've read that really made an impact on you? What are you listening to? I books, people love to recommend books and podcasts, right? Or who in your organization do you think would be willing to give me some more of their time to ask more questions because I don't want to take up any more of yours? And generally they'll say, hey, Steve or Bob or Joe or Mary or whoever would be a great connection for you. I think they'd be really beneficial for you to talk to. And at least they'll do an introduction. They'll send a message, hey, I just did an informational interview with this Purdue student. I think that you'd be great informational interview for them. I've recommended them to you. I just wanted to connect you all so you guys can set up communications. That's networking. I mean, that's literally networking. But that's a way, if you've never spoken to anybody in that organization, if you want to try to break in, other than waiting in line for 2 hours to talk to Lockheed Martin on the career fair, that's a way to do it. Cool.
I sent you a letter, my internship, what do you suggest? J.R. Kelly is gonna be at the career fair. I wasn't going to J.R. Kelly, but I worked with J.R. Kelly for some years. They
Okay.
actually wrote my recommendation letter to get into Purdue.
Okay.
He suggested I do to try to, I mean, they know me, but I'm trying to get them to see me in a different light, not just the guy they see come in as a first year apprentice.
Not wearing tool bags.
Yeah,
I would stop by the table and talk to them.
okay,
Be like, hey, you know, if they're nobody you know, right? If you walk up to the table and the representatives are people you don't recognize or have never met before, just introduce yourself and explain to them like, hey, you know, I used to work for your organization. Y'all were instrumental in writing a recommendation letter for me that got me here, that's helping me pursue this education to look for opportunities to be project manager or whatever. and just kind of show I have gratitude for y'all because you helped enable my journey. And now I'm steps above where I was in our last interaction.
Cause I just worked for them again this summer as well too.
Okay.
Since I had first came in, I had always been talking about my business. They always helped me, but it was like, I said, we don't think you're gonna be here for a long time. So I don't want that to hurt me. I still wanna kind of grow in the organization, but
I talked to him about, again, gratitude for the opportunity to help propel you here so that you could level up and pursue bigger opportunities going forward. And maybe there's opportunities there for you to take that step after your education. Give you that relevant experience. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily hide your idea for your entrepreneurship in your business, but I wouldn't, that wouldn't be the shining billboard flashing in their face. Maybe, hey, I'd love to talk to you about opportunities to gain some real world project manager experience with the organization. Cause I know what a high quality, high class organization you are, the reputation that you have, whatever.
Okay.
Whatever those positive opinions of the organization are, you can talk about those things and how you look very favorably upon the organization. Would love the opportunity to rejoin them at a higher tier. So they don't just throw work bags back on you and stick you on a job site.
I wasn't gonna go to the career fair, but I was gonna actually go in and have a one-on-one conversation with the owner, because I'm real cool, we're good friends with the owner of the company.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. Again, career fairs are literally just networking. It's blind dating. They're blind dating college students and you're blind dating companies. It's literally what it is. It's speed blind dating. You just got to say something or do something enough so that they notice you. Right? And then follow up, call them back, send them that text like, hey, I really enjoyed our coffee. You know what I mean? And to use a dating term kind of thing, and just follow up. But that was my recommendation for you.
Okay.
Was just reach back to them and just say, hey, you guys really were critical in my journey to get here where I am today. And I'm very grateful for the opportunities and I'm very grateful for the help.
Why would you want to work there? Some people saying at the beginning,
The why. If you can tell,
loyalty is for mine with them. They gave me my first opportunity in the union.
there you go. That's a heck of a why. So to give you an example of my why, and this was a why pitch I used when I was trying to get into sports. To try to get into sports is very difficult. It's kind of like, it's almost like the mob. You got to be made. Somebody's got to like invite you in to give you the secret password. You can't just like show up and I've got an education and then just hire you. It's very tough to break it. But when I would talk to these folks about why, like, hey, I'm really passionate about coming into sports and working as a sports professional. Why? Sports saved my relationship with my kids. And they kind of look at me like, okay, there's a story there, right? Because it's just kind of an open-ended statement. Said when I was coming through my military career, my kids were little and I was gone a lot. And so I had this kind of superficial relationship with my children. I was dad, they were kids, but there wasn't a whole lot of bond, right? And that realization hit me like a ton of bricks one day when I'm standing in the kitchen and I'm making a sandwich. My son was very little at the time. He comes stumbling by and bumps into my leg, bounces off of me, goes around me and goes and asks his mom if she would make him a sandwich. So here I am standing there. He literally ran into me and I'm doing the thing that he wants, but he doesn't recognize me as being that for him. I'm not that parent provider that can make him food. That was awful. That was a terrible feeling. Fast forward some years. I was coming back from my overseas tour. A friend of mine was working for the Detroit Tigers. I grew up in Michigan, and the Detroit Tigers were my hometown team. Huge fan. He hooked us up with some passes to go to Comerica Park and see the Tigers play baseball. And so we got to go there early. And we actually got to go in the stadium before anybody else, and we got to go down onto the field with the team for batting practice. So here we are, me and my two young kids, my wife, my parents were on the grass. We're on the field, hanging out with the Tigers, my favorite team. Miguel Cabrera, who at the time had just won the Triple Crown in baseball, which was super, super rare. comes walking by and signs autographs on baseballs for my kids. Alan Trammell was my childhood hero. He comes by and takes one of the practice balls the guys are playing with and hands it to my son. Says, thanks for coming out and seeing the Tigers. Then Al Kaline, Hall of Famer, my parents' favorite player, he comes by and shakes everybody's hand and thanks us all for coming out to the ballpark to support the Tigers. Like, what smokes? Like, amazing experience. I had another friend that was working in the stadium as part of the news team. She hooked us up with some free Tigers hats. We caught a foul ball in that game. It was a foul ball caught and given to my son at that game. So like, just this mind-blowing experience that was amazing. I was scared to death because how do you explain to a 4-year-old boy who's never been to a Major League Baseball game? None of this stuff happens. Like, you don't go get on the grass with the players, get autographs and hang out with Hall of Famers at every game. Like, this doesn't happen. But my kids fell in love with baseball and they fell in love with the Tigers, and that started a bond between me and my kids. And so when I say baseball or sports saved the relationship between me and my kids, I mean it, because it gave us something to bond over. It gave us something to grow a relationship out of. And I knew from that day forward, this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to work in organizations where I had the opportunity to create those kinds of experiences for other people. When I tell that story to sports teams and their recruiters, they can't offer me a job fast enough. Now, I'm not saying you got to come up with some crazy goosebump inducing story like that, but talk about your passion. Why this field? Why nuclear engineering? Why Aero-Astro? Why this company? Why? What is it that drives you? What is it that motivates you? What is it that's going to get you out of bed on that day where you're not feeling super well, you didn't sleep super well, the weather's crappy, you got to, it's going to be snowing, you got to drive. It would be so much easier to just call in sick. What's going to get you out of bed, put you in the car, drive to work? What is it that's going to motivate you to keep going back, to give them your very best effort? If you can tell them that, that's the why. And you'll stand out in that career fair, I promise. And when you follow up in these LinkedIn messages or email, I'll talk about emails a little bit, they're going to remember you. Guaranteed. Because there are tons and tons and tons of students that don't tell them that stuff. Why are you applying to me? Because you guys have the highest salary. Oh, I'm not gonna answer. What's the question?
So when you were some other good stories that
The why do you want to work in sports was never a good question. I never really got many good answers. Most of it was the same. Oh, I grew up as an athlete. I just really like sports. But when people gave me answers about like the company, why do you want to work for Play 9 Sports? Well, because you guys are uniquely situated within entertainment. You own stadiums. You have teams. You run leagues. You do tournaments. You host concerts. Like, we did a whole bunch of things across the spectrum in entertainment. And I had some of my students tell me that really intrigued them. That they knew they wanted to get into something entertainment, sports related, but that our organization, because we were so broad and diverse, would give them, they thought they would get the opportunity to try a little bit of everything and see where their niche was, see where they felt like they could fit, or where they could contribute. And those were always good answers too. So, I mean, again, talk about the field. Why do you want to be an Aero-Astro engineer? Why do you want to work at that organization? Why this position? Why that location? I mean, who knows? I city as a duty station when I was still active duty because it was the closest I've ever been to home. Growing up in Michigan, I'd never been stationed east of Mississippi in my whole career until I came here as an ROTC instructor. So I picked this location because of proximity to family and an opportunity for my kids to get to know their grandparents better. That ended up being a fairly impactful statement when I was applying for this job, as it were. Right? So that's all stuff you're doing at those career fairs as you're talking to them. All you're doing in this is referencing some of that stuff just a little bit. Just hit the high points. Again, brevity. You're not trying to hit them with a novel. Just, hey, reminder, this is who I am. These are the things we talked about. these were the things. When I'm taking my notes, I like to see when they're doing things like this. When they're doing things like this, right? Those are positive feedbacks. That's body language that tells you that they like what they're hearing. They're engaged in what you're saying. You're on the right track, right? And so if I noticed I said something that they nodded a lot to, or I talked about and they smiled real big, those went in my notes so that I could talk about whatever that was. Back out to them again later. Those are great cues. Because you never know what you might say that resonates with people. Because every human being on the planet is filled with emotions. And if you can go from being a bunch of words and numbers on a page to something emotional, you'll stick. You'll stick. If you can touch at their emotions a little bit, you can stick. Why Purdue University? Some people might ask you, why? Why'd you come to Purdue? Put 27 people on the moon. Duh. Or whatever. I mean, whatever your answer is, whatever motivated you to come to this super hard school, whatever that answer is, that can help too, especially if they're Purdue alum. Again, looking for some of those commonalities. I like to fight some. I like the idea of having a giant train as our mascot, whatever your answer might be. Any other questions before I keep droning on? All right. So those are kind of the high points of the LinkedIn piece, right? Please, before you hit send, reread it. Go back through, make sure you proofread it. Look for punctuations, look for misspellings, look for something that doesn't make sense. I am a terrible proofreader of my own work. I will fill in my own blanks if I'm reading something I just read. So for me, a tactic is stop, go do something for a minute, then come back to it. Get up, go get a drink of coffee, take a lap around the house, whatever it is you got to do. Give yourself a beat to kind of, all right, let me calm down. Let me read this as if I'm reading it for the very first time. Because one of the fastest ways to lose cool points is to send them something that's full of typos or errors or mistakes or address the wrong person or company. Dear Lockheed Martin sent to Raytheon, like, not cool, right? So give yourself a chance and proofread it before you send it in. I don't like templates per se. I like those general guidelines of, keeping it concise, reference the conversation, express the continued interest in the organization, highlight your relevant skills and experiences, and include that call to action. But don't send every person you talk to at the career fair the exact same message. We'll just copy, paste, change name, copy, paste, change name, copy, paste, change name. I don't know how, but you can kind of tell that it doesn't feel like a personalized message if it's just copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. Some people might not be able to tell, but for me, I always had kind of like a feeling about it when I was reading a message from somebody I met at a career fair. I'm like, this feels like the same message they sent to 17 other people versus one that felt like it was addressed to me. Hey, Brian, really appreciate our conversation. It sounds genuine. It sounds almost like I can hear you speak when I'm reading your words. There's something to that human connection. Then for email, right? Email is another way to do it. If they gave you a card and you have your email and you don't want to do it through LinkedIn, or you already maxed out your LinkedIn messages for today because you talked to, again, 17 companies at the career fair, and you're going to go to an email and some stuff. Same basic kind of guidelines, subject line, emphasize importance in a clear and concise manner. Some subject line examples could be like following up, your name, the job title or area of interest, and meeting at the Purdue Career Fair. Like, let them know what the email is about so that they can, oh yeah, let me check this out. Salutations. I like to say dear their name, right? Just more personal. If I've met you, I'm not gonna write to whom I may concern or something crazy like that. I'm also not gonna be super casual in it, be like, What's up, Dan? You know, following up after our conversation, it just feels too informal. So I like Dear. It's a nice way to be a little bit formal without being like, sir, reporting, too buttoned up. Talking the same messaging, doing the same kind of areas again. Reference to conversation, continued interest, skills and experience, call to action. And then in closing, sincerely, best regards, or thank you for your time and consideration. Proofread. Proofread, and then send.
So I should kind of, man, Zach is, Zach, the PM at J.R. Kelly.
Okay.
Found each other because we got the person got the same name.
Okay.
That's what made us cool. And he came through Purdue as well. So I guess I should try to talk to him more.
Wouldn't hurt. If you came through Purdue, it'd be great. What was your experience? How did you feel about the program when you came through it? Did it prepare you for what you were going to face once you got hired on? Those are all great questions that just continue the conversation. Just talk to them. I was going to talk to you a little bit about translating military civilian experience. Any veterans in the room or online? Okay, Military Connect is fine. It's more for the veterans in the room. Like, don't just think about your military job, right? For my veterans, you did so much more in the military than just your MOS or your occupational specialty. I was an infantry person by trade, but I also served in the honor guard for 3 years. I rode horses in the caisson team. I fired cannon salutes. I worked as a research development test and evaluation NCO for 3 years, which is a really fancy way of saying I was a crash test dummy. I tested new weapons, vehicles, and equipment. I was an instructor at a major Big Ten university for their ROTC department. So I did things that were way outside my scope. But I also did things like I served on certain details. Like I worked on a grass cutting detail for the post grass cutting detail for a month. I rode around on a John Deere tractor for cutting grass in the big common areas for a month. If I'm applying for a job at a golf course someplace, that might be very relevant experience that has nothing to do with being an infantryman, that I helped mow hundreds of thousands of acres a day, or whatever, right? So there's all of these other nuances and experiences to what you did. If you were ever in a leadership position, you were probably an instructor of some kind. You had to teach some kind of class about something. You probably did something related to onboarding new hires, right? You had to bring in the new soldiers or airmen or sailors, teach them the ropes, and then you had to do some onboarding. You were definitely responsible for personnel actions and things like that. So you got some HR experience. So there's a lot of things within a military experience that you can weave together to make yourself a more well-rounded candidate. So don't ever forget that stuff when you're talking to folks at career fairs, when you're thinking about applications and resumes, and when you're having these conversations. Don't neglect to think about that stuff just because the big shiny object is whatever your military occupational specialty was. Okay. Any questions? And we can hear you too, Lauren. If you got any questions, you can come off mute and ask, or you can type in the chat and I can read it and go from there. Any other questions about effective methods of following up after career fairs, about LinkedIn, about talking to recruiters, any of that stuff? Covered it so well, you're all experts. Man, I'm good. Lots to cover, it really is. I like pre-research. I like looking at my career fairs and seeing who's coming and seeing who's interested, right? So I host a Military Connected Career Fair for us, for our student population. And I put out a list of the companies that are coming early so that you can go to their web pages and you can see what they do. You can look at their careers and see what kind of positions they're hiring for. And you can see locations and you can do some research about who they are. If they send me a list of people that are coming, I will send the names of the people that are coming. So you can do some research into that person or those folks. So you can come prepared at the career fair to talk about some things, to ask some questions, to show them that you know what you're talking about. So and I can't claim credit for this. It's gonna sound like I am, but I can't. There's another student that is among us who came to a bunch of the other workshops and stuff early on, helped with resume, helped with LinkedIn, helped with interviewing, career fair prep, that kind of stuff. Came into the center before career fair a couple weeks ago, dressed to the nines, looking spiffy, professional dress, like, it was great. Because all of the things that I teach or try to teach y'all, they did it, right? The clothes were cleaned and pressed and they weren't fresh out of the package with wrinkles and pin marks and all those things that can happen when you take it out of like a JC Penney's bag and throw it on immediately. Said, do you want to go over this stuff one more time? Yes, I do. Okay, looked at the resume again, still amazing. Wrote a fabulous resume. Fabulous resume. Asked, what's your introduction? Give me your elevator pitch. Did their introduction, talked about this, that, and the other thing. Okay, who are you gonna talk to? I'm talking to one company. I was like, you sure you want to put all your eggs in one basket? He's like, yes, I do. Okay, why? Tells me why. Dude, it's a pretty good story. The why is there. Why this company? Why this organization? It made sense. He went downstairs because it was just downstairs in the ballroom. 7 minutes later, he came back and said, I've got an interview and a tour of the facility. I was just like, dude, that's awesome. Like, he came back, I was like, that was fast. Did not go well. He's like, no, I went down there and talked to him, and they said I was the first student that came up to them and told it, like, knew what that company did, because I'd never heard of it either. It was some obscure company, obscure name, but he's like, most students, they said, walked up to him and said, so what does your company do? Well, you don't even know what we do. Why are you talking to us? But he walked up and says, oh yeah, I know what you do. You do this. And that's exactly what I want to do. I want to come work for you guys doing this thing because X, Y, and Z. My time in the Marines as a mechanic, I saw a lot of machinery that was poorly engineered and very difficult to maintain because the person designing it didn't think about the person who had to twist wrenches on it later. And I want to create things that can be maintained, it can be serviced, and I want to think about the other folks, the users in my designs. I want to work for your organization because X, Y, and Z. Again, 7 minutes later, he's got an interview and they're taking him to their location for a tour of the facility. Out of town, by the way, like not here, they are taking him out of town to go to the facility. I was just like, wow, that's awesome. So results may vary, obviously, but that's an example of how that preparation can make a difference. Had a well-prepared resume, had a well-prepared introduction, had well-prepared questions and research on the organization, went down there and was instantly the best candidate they'd met on campus. Didn't even need to follow up, just unnecessary. So think about that stuff. Think about some of those obscure brands. Doesn't have to say Lockheed Martin, Boeing, SpaceX, whatever on the logo. There's lots of really amazing companies. Not that saying those companies are bad, but there's lots of really amazing companies out there with lots of really amazing opportunities that people don't necessarily think of. I mean, John Deere's making tractors that drive themselves, tracked by GPS and satellite stuff. Like that's some next level thing. Like Lincoln, my wife just got a new car, a Lincoln, and it's the first series of cars that they have that can do like the auto drive on the road. But John Deere's got tractors that will auto farm already. Like that's kind of cool. So there's lots and lots of opportunities out there that exist outside of just those great big logos. Don't dismiss those. They can be really, really good opportunities. What else? Yes. Yes. I like either within about 48 hours or the following week, generally speaking, right? How do you tell? Great question. Generally, like when I'm having a conversation with the recruiters, I try to get a feeling for what they're going through. So where are you coming from? Where are you going to next? How many of these events do you have on your calendar? Just because I'm trying to help them understand I see the human in them. They're not just a polo shirt and a business card, right? And that kind of gauges me on how busy they are. Oh, man. Brutal. We were at IU yesterday. We're here today. We're at Notre Dame tomorrow. On Friday, we're in Ann Arbor, then East Lansing, then down to Columbus, Ohio. And then we hit the West Coast tour and we're up and down the coast of California. Okay, this is somebody I want to connect with sooner rather than later. Because the longer they go from now to when I reach up with, catch back up with them, the more faces they're going to see. The harder it's going to be for them to recall. But I have some recruiters that come up like, this is the one event I'm doing this year. They brought me here because I'm a Purdue alum. And so the company sent me here. Yeah, repeat their question for me. Their question was, the timeline for follow-up. When is the best time to follow up? Sorry, I didn't see you. I put my glass on. Okay, so it was about when is the best time to follow up. But, Los Alamos National Laboratories comes out to our military recruiting event every year too. And the folks they send from Los Alamos come to Purdue, and that's all those individuals do is coming to Purdue because they're Purdue alums. And so you could probably follow up with them the week after, and they're not going to forget you because they're going to go back to Los Alamos to go back to work, and you can follow up the following week. It's just kind of how it feels. Also, I gauge it by the line. If there's a 1 billion person line, and I've been standing out like IR is nuts. The Industrial Roundtable to me is madness. That whole Memorial Mall is just swamped with people. If I'm standing in line for 2 hours to talk to somebody, we have a really good 30-second conversation because that's about all I'll give you time for. Following up with that person probably tomorrow. Hey, I really enjoyed our conversation yesterday. I just wanted to follow up with you. Yada, 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 yada. Oh, by the way, I applied for this job. Or I looked at your applications. I looked at your job career page and I saw about 3 positions I'm really interested in. I would love your feedback on which of those 3 that you think I would be the best candidate or a better candidate for. It's a great way to do it, especially if you had a good conversation. Oh, let's check these out. I think job number 2 is really up your alley based on your life experience, military experience, whatever. That second job, I think you'd be a really strong candidate. Thank you. I appreciate your feedback. I will go ahead and apply now. And then follow back up. Hey, I applied for that job. I really appreciate the recommendation. Just being people. Right? Any others? That's a great question. Great question. As far as choosing LinkedIn or email, kind of on you. It's kind of what you feel more comfortable with. If I had personally my first version of my LinkedIn profile, probably wouldn't do a whole lot of following up on LinkedIn because my LinkedIn profile was atrocious. When I was retiring and going through my career transition stuff, I went to a LinkedIn workshop where they taught you how to build an effective LinkedIn profile. And the first thing they threw up there were the top 10 faux pas of a military LinkedIn profile. And I was 10 for 10. I had everything you could do wrong on there. I had me in a military uniform as a picture, check. Military duty position titles and military jargon, check. Like no connections outside of my Army buddies, check. Like it was rough. And I ended up spending like 2 days after the workshop just basically wiping it clean, starting fresh. If I had done some things and I had a LinkedIn profile that I felt pretty comfortable with, now I'm not saying you got to have one of these ones that's got all of the things and all of the references and recommendations and endorsements and all the crazy things LinkedIn can do. You don't have to have all that. But if you feel pretty comfortable about it, it's updated, you've got a decent photo on there, you've done some spell check and it's not filled with a bunch of typos and errors, yeah, you can use LinkedIn. It's great. It's a fantastic tool. You feel more comfortable using your email, use your email. Either is fine, honestly. And also depends on what kind of contact they gave you. If they only give you LinkedIn, it kind of hamstrung them. Or if they only gave you an email. This is stuff easy. This is the fun stuff.
I was just thinking about, even though I ended up with J.R. Kelly this summer, I was, okay, which is the number one, the largest, design build construction company in Indiana.
Okay.
Now, if I was trying to really grow, I would think Wilhelm would be the place that I, need to be. As I said, my lines was Sergeant Hargrove used to say cross training.
Yep.
I might not be efficient, the best in this position, but you know, if somebody calls off that you can't put me here, well, I keep the ball rolling. Versus just, you know, I don't know, kind of thing. Like I said, it's a lot to do, right?
Yeah. Job hunting is work. It's a lot of work. The other thing I'll tell you, a little tip on the job post. Job post is not a requirements list, not hard and fast. It's a dream sheet. As a guy who used to write those, if I had a perfect candidate that I could make in a factory, this is what they would be. I've never, and I hired a couple hundred people, never hired anybody that was 100% of my requirements list. Never. They were 60% or above, and we could have a good conversation. Let's have an interview and let's go from there, right? So if if you match 60% of what they got, throw your hat in the ring. Why not? What's the worst they can say? Nothing? That's the worst they can say. When they go, yeah, that's awful. You send in an application or resume and then you hear nothing from the company ever again. Pretty frustrating. At least they can use like, we filled the position. Thank you for your, interest in our organization.
What they say in our industry, 5% of the job is just showing up. And that's my niche. They know I show up every single day.
Right.
So
But you have an interesting challenge as college students. There's a lot of you out there hunting for jobs in the same companies. And a lot of college students look very, very similar. I mean, you could ask them too, like, my underclassmen in the room, I love that you're here this early in your college career. That's awesome. Huge kudos to you for being here and being invested in this now. Because you can ask them, what can I do to make myself the most desirable candidate for your organization when I get ready to graduate? They're probably going to say, internships. Cool. I want to hunt down some internships. Okay.
What are you looking for on like a resume, like what qualities of a person might have?
Okay.
And I remember that they said detail oriented, so I'm gonna be focusing on.
Yeah. Thanks for being here. Again, their whole job is to help bring college students into their organization to be future employees. They're great references of information. I mean, they really are. Like, what are you looking for? What does a successful candidate look like? I've had students tell me, oh, I'm just a freshman, I'm not going to career fair. Why not? You could go down to the career fair, talk to some of those companies that don't have long lines and be like, I'm a freshman, but I've got time here to make sure that I can build out my resume and my experience and all that to make sure that I'm successful and ready to go when I'm a senior. What would you recommend? Get your certification in underwater basket weaving because it's a super critical skill in what we do at our company. Whatever, like you never know what kind of obscure thing they may say. There's another student that I work with quite frequently. He's in computer stuff, and what he finds is the different kinds of programs and software that they want certifications in. And he spends a little bit of money out of pocket, and on nights and weekends, he goes and takes online classes through like Udemy or Coursera or those things to get those certifications. So when he gets ready to graduate and try to get hired, he's got that list of certifications ready to go. I've got them all. Everything you told me to get, I'm gonna got. You don't hire me at this point, you're crazy. Because I'm bringing $500,000 worth of value for a $80,000 job. Whatever. Right? Anything else? Like I said, I'm happy to sit here and answer your questions all night long if that's what you want, but I don't want to keep you either if you got other places to be and other things to do. I'm happy to let you get some time back. Sure.
So. Just, I'm painting in broad strokes here.
Okay.
but How would you approach all of this networking stuff if your ultimate goal is to work not in a. Like, how do you network?
Same way. LinkedIn's a great tool. LinkedIn's worldwide. And if Europe's where you want to go, then I'd start looking for those European companies and look for some of those European organizations and see what kinds of things they would recommend that are going to set you up for success to translate your education here to success there. That's that's actually a great line of questioning to get into of what do I got to do as an American university graduate to be successful in the European job market? Because I guarantee you they hire Americans at those companies over there. So they've got something in their mind they're already thinking about what makes the ideal American employee or a person that they hired out of an American university. It may look totally different, but at least they can tell you. That's actually a great series of questions. Question, all right. If you're a military spouse, you're applying for jobs, but you may be PCS in the near future, would you recommend discussing this in the initial interview? No. Technically, they can't discriminate against you for that, but human nature is a thing. And the hiring process is kind of terrible, if I'm being totally honest. It's long, it's arduous. You spend a lot of time and effort on candidates that don't pan out, that they don't look out, they don't end up being what you're looking for. And you don't want to give that organization any additional reason to dismiss you as a candidate. So I wouldn't bring it up. Because the other thing is you never know, right? Spending as much time in the military as I did, I PCS'd a lot, but there were times I was put on orders and those orders were rescinded and I didn't go anywhere after all. So you don't really kind of know that you're going until you kind of get in the car or get in the plane and go. So I would leave that kind of stuff open, if that answers your question. See, but I mean, you're not, and I don't want it to make it sound like you're being disingenuous and you're trying to hide it, because you're really not. You're not discussing something that may or may not be relevant in the near future until you know for certain. Anything else? Great question. Okay, if that's it, I'm gonna stop the recording and I'm gonna sign off. Thank you all for being here. If you didn't sign on the sheet, please do. Again, if you got any questions or want to try to remember something I said, because I talk a lot and fast, this will go on our YouTube channel. I head out for a conference next week. So it probably won't be on our YouTube channel next week, but the week after it'll be on there. There's a bunch of other workshops on there. Feel free to peruse at your discretion. That's a great question. Hang on, let me stop this recording.